Welcome to the Empowerment Zone with Ramona Houston, where we zone in on Black and Brown relations and our journey to empowering our communities.
Hello, welcome to the Empowerment Zone. I have Mr. Derek Hubbard here with me today, and I'm so delighted that he's here. He's going to talk about finding and using your voice, which all of us have our own perspectives and our own voice, and we are empowered by our voice. So I can't wait to hear his perspective on that. Derek Hubbard is a Texan, and as you all know, I'm a Texan. I am from a small town called Brownwood, Texas, and I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia is a great place to live. It just needs to be Atlanta, Texas, and then it would be perfect. But anyway, Derek Hubbard is manager of external communications and a spokesperson for Southwest Airlines, which, as you all know, Southwest Airlines hub is in Texas, in Dallas, Texas. In his role, Derek manages a team responsible for the company's organic social media content, as well as branded partnerships and entertainment. He serves on various boards. He's worked as a television producer, and he's also lived in London and worked in financial communications there. Derek was recognized in 2017 by PR News as a 30 and under 30 rising PR star. So we've got a superstar in our midst. He is also a host of a show called Community Conversations. And so I can't wait to hear all about that. But welcome, Derek. How are you today?
Hi, Ramona. Thank you for having me. I am doing well. And I have to tell you, there actually is an Atlanta, Texas, and it's not far from my hometown.
For real?
Yeah.
Where are you from in Texas?
So I'm from a small town in East Texas. You've never heard of it. It's about 3,000 people strong. And Atlanta, I would say, well, I'm not going to tell you how far away it is because I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it's very close. And it's also a small town.
Wow. So what town are you from?
I'm from a town called Hooks.
Hooks. Where is that near? Is that near Tyler?
Well, not far from Tyler. It's actually closer to Texarkana, if you're familiar with Texarkana, Texas,
yes.
Texarkana, Arkansas. So we're about 15 minutes west of Texarkana.
Get out of here. Another small town Texan. We got to do an episode just about that, about growing up in small towns, and what that's like.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you have stories for days just like I do.
Yes. Let's share one. Let's share a memory from the small town before we get all started on the serious stuff.
Okay. So I'll go first. I'll tell you, growing up in a very small town in Texas, it's pretty rural, lots of farmland and lots of vegetation and crops. And so one of the memories that I have with my grandparents, as well as parents and siblings and cousins, we would go and pick things like corn or blackberries or, other vegetables like peas. And then we'd all come back and sit outside and shuck corn and shell peas. And I was the youngest in my family. And so often I would get tired or sick of doing the work and would kind of have a fit. And that never worked out with my parents and grandparents. But now that I'm older, I look back on those memories as really fun times of togetherness and really being able to do something collectively as a family. But I don't necessarily know if you get that growing up in a larger city, but I will say from the country perspective, there's plenty of corn, plenty of peas, plenty of blackberries, and so much more that you can pick and make it a family affair.
Wow. Just you talking about that brought memories to me. Now, we're a little bit bigger town than yours. We had about 17,000, but it was still only one high school and one junior high. But those are memories I had as well. We had a garden. A lot of community members had gardens, and often they would trade, depending on who was growing what. And
Sure.
just talking about shucking corn and doing the peas and all that, I'm sitting there thinking of sitting with my aunts and doing that. And so that's that's very interesting in terms of that experience of actually having fresh, vegetables.
Right.
More so than fruit, because we didn't do a lot of fruit, but a lot of fresh vegetables. And also, I just remember one thing, sharing a memory of mine, staying with my great aunts, and when my parents would travel, and one of the persons on the block had chickens. He had chickens in his back.
Oh, okay.
And so just waking up to a rooster, that, that's just something that you don't get in the city.
Right. Well, Ramona, I have to tell you quickly, my neighbors who lived across the street, they had chickens, and there was a rooster who he would, I don't know what sound the roosters make, but the cock-a-doodle-doo that you hear kind of on television, this rooster would do that cock-a-doodle-doo at all times throughout the day and the night. And so I don't know how this rooster got off schedule, but I remember my family and I, we always were like, oh my gosh, this rooster, like, it needs to stop. And shortly thereafter, the rooster ended up disappearing. So I don't know if the family took it somewhere, if it ran away, flew away. But I can relate to hearing roosters and other chickens around from my neighbors.
Isn't that something? Well, we'll have to come back, and you'll have to come back, and we can talk about living in a small town.
Oh, absolutely. We can do that all day.
So why don't you tell us about yourself? I know you stated you're in a small town, but audience definitely wants to know a little bit about you. So tell us about you.
So yeah, as I mentioned, I did grow up in a very small town here in Texas, and I come from a decent sized family, a relatively large family with multiple brothers and lots of cousins, too many to count and not enough time here. And so for me growing up, family was always number one and always very important. And now as an adult, I still look at those close relationships that I have with members of my family as my solid foundation and my rock. And it really has served me well as I have advanced in my career, having now worked for Southwest Airlines for about 5 years in the public relations function, social media function, as well as our entertainment function. And for me, everything that I do, whether it be a personal relationship or a professional relationship, everything I do really comes down to being able to tell stories that matter, tell stories that are impactful, and that ultimately tap into the human condition and the human spirit in hopes of bringing us all together to better understand one another.
Oh, that's great. Stories are so important. And when you tell stories about different people from different backgrounds, you really see the similarities between the human condition. A lot of people try to label different groups of people as this or that, but really stories show that we have very similar experiences in various ways.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ramona. And I don't know if I necessarily knew that as a child, but I think back to the way that my parents raised my brothers and me to be open to people who didn't look like us, who didn't believe like us, who had different thoughts and opinions than us, different political beliefs than us. And the idea that we should love these people regardless of anything else, that to me, I think is a novel concept, especially in this day and age that we find ourselves in now where there's so much divisiveness. Learning how to love and learning how to show compassion and humanity to your neighbor to the left and the right of you, regardless of anything else, is so important now more than ever. And so for me, as I think about these different stories, as I got older and I'm hearing these stories from so many different people, what I'm learning is that, yeah, we may believe differently, or yeah, we may vote for different political candidates. But at the end of the day, there's so much more that connects us than divides us. And if I can better understand who you are, better understand why you do the things you do, or what makes you tick, or what makes you think the way you think, it's not meant to necessarily change my mind or my views, but more so to better be able to understand and better be able to show that love and humanity one to the other.
I totally agree that a lot of challenges that we have, not only in the U.S., but in the world, is because people fail to communicate and just learn about one another. We have certain ideas that we project about other people, and most of the time we don't even know them. We don't live next to them. We don't talk to them. We don't have relationships. We're not in organizations together. And so we make all these assumptions about different groups of people, I guess you can say, or what other. And so those conversations are what make us realize how similar we are. Even though we may have differences, we can still live together in this world. So that is a great way to pivot to your topic in terms of your topic being finding and using your voice. So can you tell us about that concept and how you use your voice?
So the best way for me to really approach this idea of finding and using your voice is really to dive a bit deeper into how I was able to find my voice and able to use my voice. So like a lot of young people who are in high school and still trying to figure out who you are, still trying to understand your place in the world, I was very politically active. I was that student who knew what was happening with the political candidates, who knew what was happening from a local civic organization perspective, political organization perspective. And it was my sophomore year of high school, and I had started a chapter of a national nonprofit organization that was instrumental in ensuring that students across the country were civically active in nonpartisan political discourse and discussion. And so what this organization strove to do on the national level really was engage a generation of students to find their voice and ultimately to use their voice within the political space. It didn't really matter who you believed in, what your political party was, or any of that. It was just more about educating and allowing people to use their voice. And so what I learned through this organization and what I learned through having this chapter at my local high school was that there were so many students who were around me, myself included, who had a voice but didn't necessarily know how to use it. They were told by adults that you're too young, you don't really know what you're talking about, you don't have enough life experiences, or they were told by their peers, well, we don't really want to hear that because we believe this, and we don't care if you believe differently than we do. So as you mentioned, those assumptions, without knowing the person to the left or right of you, or without knowing their story, all of that was running rampant within my high school, within my town. And I'm not saying that was a unique problem to just that small town. I think it was just a unique problem to all communities where there were young people who were trying to be vocally active within this process. And so for me, I really had to stop and ask myself, why am I doing the things that I am doing with this organization? And why is it important for me to ensure that there is a safe, inclusive space for these students, my peers, to come together and debate the hot topics of the day? And when I took a step back and I really looked at why I was doing all of that, it came down to something very simple. For me, the reason that I was doing those things when I was in high school was because it was important to me, and I wanted to create an engaged group of students who would then go on to be the leaders of tomorrow. And as I look back on it, maybe I was overly ambitious in thinking that this organization would be able to do that. But there was something really unique and special to me about wanting to ensure that these students were able to go forth and be those people. And so as I transition now into adulthood and being in corporate America and in the workforce and engaging in a variety of different levels now, finding your voice still goes back to understanding why you're doing what you're doing. You know, you hear politicians say, the reason I'm running is I want to better education for all people. I want to help prison reform. I think we should have better tax codes, or we need a leaner budget, whatever that may be. We hear those reasons as to why these politicians are running. But I say the same thing to the rest of us who are not politicians, to those of us who don't hold any civic positions or any political positions within organizations. We have to understand why it is that we want to do the things that we want to do before we can even begin to speak. And some people may say that that's a little backward. Some people may say, well, no, you should just speak and then you'll figure it out along the way. And that may work for people. But if you don't know why you're doing something, you're not necessarily going to know where you're trying to go. And so one of the things that I try to encourage people as I meet them one-on-one, or as I have them on the Instagram series that you mentioned that I do, is I ask them, why is this important to you? Why is this a topic that you want to get out there? And why do people need to care about this? And without pause, all of them, they already know, because they're out there doing the work. This isn't just lip service. This is something that is ingrained into who they are.
Very interesting. So when you look at your show, Community Conversations, and you're talking to different people about their whys and what they do, what are you finding some of the themes are in your community conversations? Before you go there, what are you covering in Community Conversations? What is your show about?
Right. So Community Conversations is an Instagram series that began after the killing of George Floyd. And I saw an opportunity within my own circle, within my own community, to begin having these really impactful, deep conversations about race relations, identity, and the marginalization of underrepresented communities within the United States. So pretty light topics, if you ask me, right? And so what I realized after the killing of George Floyd, a friend of mine reached out and he said something really simple yet profound to me. He said, Derek, in all the years that I've known you, we have never once talked about race or your experience as a Black man in America. And I would be willing, if you're willing to have that difficult conversation, because we've never had it, and I think now is an important time to do it. And it caught me off guard. And this is someone I consider a friend, a trusted person in my life. And so I said, sure, yeah, I'm more than happy to have this conversation with you. And as he and I had this 2-hour conversation, what I realized was that outside of my friends and family who look like me, I have never had a deep conversation about race with someone who was a different ethnicity. And it really struck me. It really challenged me, and it made me sit kind of in that discomfort. And I had to ask myself why. I said, well, Derek, why haven't you ever done this before? And the answer is because it is difficult, and it is because I was afraid of being labeled an angry Black man. I was afraid of being told that, well, racism doesn't exist. We elected President Obama. I was afraid that people were going to tell me, well, I think you're overreacting, or you're looking at it in a very different way than you should be looking at it. And all of these fears had ultimately silenced me. And so as I continue to think about the silence and about how, to me, I felt like the silence really was helping me, and it was helping others, because it wasn't creating this extra layer of oppression, if you will. I realized that the silence actually was not doing any good, because when I look at the progress, when I look at the people that I know from a historical perspective who were instrumental in making change, when I look at the people currently who are instrumental in making change, guess what they're not being? They're not being silent. And so I had to tell myself that, you know what, Derek, you have a voice, you have a perspective. And one of the gifts God has given you is the ability to connect and talk to other people. So use your gift and spread it. And so this idea, I was in the post office and this idea just popped into my mind. And it was to do this weekly Instagram live series where I would just invite people that I knew and also people that maybe I don't know to come on and have this deep conversation about race in America, identity, and the marginalization of underrepresented communities. And what I found, instantly what I found is that there was an appetite with my audience for these conversations. Mm-hmm. People were responding to me privately. Some were texting me if they knew me, calling and just saying, wow, this was really impactful. I learned a lot. I had no idea that this was an issue, or now I know how I can get involved in being part of the solution for this issue. So you asked me kind of what themes are emerging and what are the overall trends that I am seeing with these conversations. And I would say the biggest trend that I'm seeing with these conversations is that there are a lot of people who want to do good and who want to be part of the solution. I think it's easy for us to look on the news, easy for us to look on social media and just see an apathetic group of individuals within this country, because it's easier now more than ever to have an opinion, put it out on Twitter, and you never know if that person is actually doing any work. Yep. There's no way for us to know unless we see it.
Yep.
So I think by me doing this show and having these conversations and hearing the actual work that people are doing and hearing where they're being impactful and hearing the groups and organizations that they're helping or donating to, or hearing, the boots on the ground stories, that really did inspire me. And it really gave me hope that, okay, maybe we're not in as bad of a predicament as it appears, because there are people who are out there championing this work and who want to see change.
You are so correct. Change happens when you can influence people's minds, right? And how can you influence people if you're not talking to people?
Right.
And having those conversations really help people to change their perspectives as well as their actions. Right. Always, my area in American history is race relations. And when I do workshops and speak, I talk about people talking to each other, like, where did you learn certain ideas?
Right.
What keeps those ideas going in your mind? How is it that you can maintain these perspectives for so long, and having those conversations? And what I found is that although they're difficult conversations to have, people want to have them. So they want to talk, but it's like talking about race is taboo. You're not,
right.
You stay here, you stay over here, and let's not have a conversation.
Absolutely. And I think so many of us grew up that you don't talk about race, religion, or politics ever. That those are the topics we stay away from. Those are dangerous. Outside of the people who maybe live within your household, your family, outside of that, don't bring that up anywhere. And what I think the danger in that is, Ramona, is that it forces us to leave parts of ourselves at the door. Mm-hmm. It forces us to possibly be silent or turn a blind eye when we see something that goes against everything that we believe, goes against how we feel about other people. One of the things I asked one of my guests on the show one of the earlier episodes, one or two, was what are some things that people can do in their everyday life to be a part of the solution? And one of my guests said, a simple thing you can do, you can call out a microaggression.
Yep.
You don't necessarily have to be the person that is organizing a protest. If you do, that's great. If that's, where you're called to lead. But it can be as simple as when you are at work or when you are in your friend group and someone says a racial slur or presents a microaggression toward you, someone in the group. And quite frankly, even someone who is not present, it's your responsibility to speak up and say, hey, actually, that's not cool. And here's why. Here's why that behavior does not work, not only with me, and it shouldn't work anywhere else. And that was so profound to me because I think so often before I was under the assumption that if you weren't doing anything big, you weren't making a difference. But to your point, Ramona, that educational piece is so important. And if you have the knowledge, if you have the education where you can help someone else, well, then hopefully they'll do better the next time. I say this on the show probably every single episode. When you know better, you do better. Mm-hmm. And how can you do better if you don't know better? So it's up to those of us who do know and who do have the information to share it and to call it out whenever we see it.
Yes, I totally agree. And actually, to your previous point, we have to open the door so that we can have these conversations. Like you said, you're not supposed to talk about politics, race, and religion. And I always tell people, why not? Why can't we talk? Right. Why can't we talk about it? Why can't I hear your perspectives on those issues? And it's because people don't want to feel uncomfortable and they're pretty rigid about what their beliefs are. And I think people are rigid about what their beliefs are is because they don't consider other perspectives, like, can I listen? Can I listen? And then, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I understand that, and come to the table. And I think that's the challenge with our national politics, local and national politics right now.
I agree.
We can't have conversation. It's either my way or no way. And we need to find some common ground. And also, that's one of my, one of the things that I agree when I do workshops on race relations is the importance of, even though your friend said it differently, the importance of people not allowing certain behaviors in their midst in order that they can create environments where racial antagonism or any other kind of, you called it microaggression. A lot of people don't know that word, but these racial antagonisms are not permitted. You don't permit racial jokes. You don't permit, people talking certain ways about certain groups of people. You don't allow people to treat certain ways in your midst. So I totally agree with you. And I like the way your interview said, you don't have to be out there in the streets and you find your own way.
Right.
You find your own way.
And I think that's the key, Ramona. You do have to find, as I mentioned earlier, you do have to find that why, but you also have to understand where you're most comfortable and where you can have the biggest impact. And the impact can look so differently from person to person. Yep. The way you, Ramona, are out here helping, influencing, educating is different than the way that I'm doing it. And it's different than the way the person to my right is doing it.
Exactly.
Guess what? We need all of them. Mm-hmm. We need all of them. So it's not a matter of anyone saying, well, I have to do it like Ramona. Well, if you're talented and you have that gift to do it just like you, well, perfect. But if you don't, you have a specific gift. You have a specific calling that works within your life and works within your area of influence. And I want to go back to something else you said about being able to open the door to have these conversations. Another thing that I have learned through this work is that so often we don't have the conversations because we are afraid of what others may think of us, and we're afraid of saying the wrong thing. And I had a guest challenge me, and he told me, he said, this work is messy, it's uncomfortable. We're going to say the wrong thing. We may get heated. We may feel hot kind of under the collar, but why is that a bad thing? Yeah. Why is it bad for us to have a messy conversation or to have an uncomfortable conversation or to get in the mud, not in a mean way, not in a, fisticuffs type of way, but why are we afraid of doing all of those things? He said, because that's where the real work and the real change happens. Mm-hmm. He said, if we can't take the mask off, if we can't really get in there and say the things that we hold ourselves back from saying to one another, in a respectful way, he said, how else are we ever going to really be able to affect change and to see each other for who we are? And that really, that stuck with me for weeks after I had that interview, because I had always looked at it differently as, well, when it gets really uncomfortable or when it gets kind of contentious, that's when you back away. But he says, no, that's when you lean in, and that's where the magic happens. And as I've had additional conversations since that one, when it starts to get that way, I lean in. And Ramona, I will tell you, the results have been absolutely positive. It doesn't result in a fight. It doesn't result in an argument. And it's also possible, I'm not that type of person anyway, so I don't engage in that type of behavior anyway. So to me, nothing is ever so serious that we have to, come to that. But it's just been really great to see how, when you are okay with vulnerability and you are okay kind of going to that place and leaving yourself exposed, people tend to meet you in that same space. And it's almost a safety and security situation where, for me, vulnerability is leaving my weapons and my armor at home. And when I show up without my weapons and my armor, and you see that, then you kind of go, well, I look silly with my weapons and my armor here too. So let me throw it to the side and let's just get real and understand that we have now created a safe space where I'm not here to harm you. You are not here to harm me, but instead we're here to listen, not to respond, but listen to understand.
Whoa. So I have a lot to say, but when you talk about, in a spiritual context, talking about suiting up with your armor, I was looking at armor in a spiritual context. We're always supposed to be suited up, Right. But to your point, that armor where you're trying to be defensive about everything, that's a different kind of armor,
totally.
Let's not come with our bats and whatever else, swords, and when we're trying to have a conversation and we're trying to get through a subject, and trying to understand one another. And by disarming ourselves in that way, not in a spiritual way, but disarming ourselves in a mental way, that we can actually be comfortable with being uncomfortable, I guess.
Yeah, that's it, Ramona. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I'm a firm believer. You definitely better stay spiritually armored up. I mean, that is so important, and it's important in my life. But I think back to my past life. I was an academic debater and member of the academic mock trial team. So I was trained to fight fair, and also trained to really have order and rules with how you have these discussions. And so one of the things that I realize now is that whenever we are talking one to the other, we are really looking at it as, I'm not going to say an argument, but a debate. And so it's like, I have to have a counter argument to what you say. I have to have all of this evidence to prove to you why I'm right and you're wrong. But I disagree that we should be debating one another. Instead, we should be engaging in civil discourse. We should be engaging in conversations that are not about me trying to change your mind about something, but instead about you being open to hearing what it is I have to say, what I believe, and why I believe that. And at the same token, I'm giving you the same courtesy whenever you speak. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with a peer or a friend where we may walk away from it, saying, okay, thank you for sharing that. I still believe A, B, and C, but I understand where you're coming from. And now I have more empathy when I see this in the street, or now I better understand what people go through whenever this situation happens. And again, I think it all comes back to having more love and more compassion for one another and the human condition. And I don't know, maybe I'm an optimist, maybe I'm too positive, but I just truly believe that there is a way for us to live together in harmony with all of us not looking the same and all of us not believing the same.
Exactly. And I like the way you put that, we should be able to live together and be different. I eat salads every day. Salad is not a soup where we all mesh and we're the same thing, right?
Right.
It's different vegetables all on one plate and all look different, and they live together in peace and harmony. To your point about debate versus civil discourse, I think that's a great way to evaluate conversations, because a lot of times we're just wanting to be right. And we're taught that's what debate is, instead of looking at that's what you do in a conversation, I guess you can say, debate, when actually it's about civil discourse. And one thing that's so important in civil discourse is listening and empathy, like you
absolutely
emphasize. And you can still maintain your ideas and beliefs, but hopefully by listening to me or me listening to you, that we've influenced each other's and each other in the way we think, instead of saying it's just my way. Well, I'm really happy that we had this conversation, and I'm happy to hear about the success of your Instagram. Instagram? Is it
Instagram? That's
okay,
right.
Instagram show, Community Conversation. So I always like to leave with a few calls to action. For those who are listening to this conversation, what advice would you give them in terms of, dealing with race relations and having conversations? What have you learned from your show that you would like to share with our audience about calls to action?
Yeah, so what I would say, for me, there are three things that I think people should keep in mind as they have these conversations and either begin to do this work or continue doing this work. Number one, find your why. Understand exactly why it is that you are doing the things that you are doing. Why is this work important, and why is it important for you to be that voice and to be that person who is out there on the front lines in whatever way that means for you to affect change? The second thing is, once you've found out why you're doing it and you have a really clear intention, then you've got to speak up. And to me, I think this is where the hard work really comes in. This is a 24/7, 365-day commitment. Now, you may not necessarily be, quote, on the front lines 24/7, 365, but it's waking up every single day, understanding your intention and being active in this conversation and in this work. So as I mentioned before, you may not be the person who's organizing a protest, but instead, maybe you're calling out the things that you see in your circles. That can work. Or maybe you are the person organizing the protest. Maybe you're the person driving senior citizens to the polls so that way they're able to vote. Maybe you're working on eradicating voter suppression. Whatever it is that you are doing, you've got to speak up and you've got to be active in that conversation. And then the last thing that I will say is recruit other people. Think about the work that you are doing and think about how you can mobilize others to join you in this excellent work. Because the thing that I'm learning is that there are a lot of people who do want to get busy and who do want to be a part of the solution, but they have no clue how and they don't know where to start. And how easy is it for us to be able to do different things whenever we have a friend doing it with us or a loved one doing it with us? So if you know that voter suppression is your issue and that's what you're fighting against, hey, bring a friend and say, hey, do you know about voter suppression? Can I tell you more about it? Do you want to get involved in helping me? And just bring them along and see where they can plug in with their gifts and with their talents. And I promise, in my experience, what I have seen is that if you follow this, it's not a magic bullet, but instead it is a great way for you to take the first step and for you to also take the first step with those around you. And I wish all of you listening much success and, can't wait to see all of the great work that you will do in your communities.
I love it, Derek. Know your why, get involved, and bring a friend. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure talking to you. I definitely want to have you back to hear about how these community conversations are going, especially after the elections that have happened.
Yes.
We are a 50-50 country, looks like, and how, well, really, I should say 50 to 48, something like that.
I was about to say, yeah.
Because Biden did win that election, so have a conversation about how our country is doing and what are you discovering post elections about these conversations. So I would be delighted to have you back. So thank you so much for joining us. And if people want to hear your show, Community Conversations, can you tell them how to listen, please? And when
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love for you all to listen to the show. It's at Derek K. Hubbard. That's DerekKhubbard, and that's on Instagram. The show is every Wednesday, but we are on hiatus until 2020. But there are a slew of episodes that are archived on my Instagram under Instagram TV. So you can check them all out and let me know what you think.
All right. Thanks so much, Derek, for joining us today. I was delighted to have this conversation with you.
It was my pleasure, Ramona. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of the great work that you were doing.
Thank you. Hi, today we have Mr. Derek K. Hubbard with us, and he's going to give us some advice for college success. So, Derek, can you tell us what schools did you attend? What was your major? And what is that one piece of advice you would give students who want to excel and succeed in college?
Hi, Ramona. So I attended the Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, or SMU for those who may know it by a different name. And I majored in corporate communications and public affairs, and I also had a minor in Spanish. And the one piece of advice I would give to students in college looking for success is to seek out opportunities to walk in someone else's shoes. I think it's so important to have viewpoints and a worldview that is broader than just what we see in front of us. And the only way you can do that is by engaging in active conversations with people who don't look like you, who don't believe like you, and seeking opportunities to listen, to understand.
I love that advice, to get to know other people and get to learn about other people's experiences so that you can have a worldview. I know when I was at the university, Clark Atlanta University, one of the things was going to the other campuses, because we have several institutions right across the street from each other.
Right.
And a lot of people stayed on their own campuses instead of getting to know other students on other campuses and other organizations. So that is great advice. Thank you so much. Hope this helps our students who are listening to this show.
A special thank you to the incredible team of the Empowerment Zone. Terry Gully, theme song, NADWorks, digital support, and of course, our featured guest.
If you enjoyed my podcast, please subscribe. We are on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts too. Thank you for your continued support.